Alec Baldwin accidentally shoots and kills a crew member on set. WeWork goes public at last, and love, hate, 8 to end the week. Friday Need to Know. Let's go. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need to Know podcast for Friday, October 22nd. I'm Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Hi, Carlo.
Happy Friday Talk, everybody. It is YouTube Watch Party Friday. You can join us at 9 a.m. Eastern Time in the live chat, youtube.com/Cheddar now. And I have one request for everybody joining today. I need some Halloween costume ideas for the Franimal.
I'll give you a bunch. I could give you a ton of ideas.
Okay.
Wait, how old is she now?
She's almost 5 months.
Okay.
I'm thinking pumpkin. I feel like you can't go wrong with like an infant
go
and a
to
pumpkin.
Carter's and just get like a pumpkin onesie.
I wanted to dress her as a minion, but Becky put the kibosh on that. I don't know why. I love the minions. Anyway, discuss with us in the YouTube live chat along with anything else you want to talk about. We'll be in there at 9 a.m.
All right, let's start with this breaking news overnight. Actor Alec Baldwin discharged a prop gun on a movie set in New Mexico, killing the cinematographer and wounding the director, according to the Santa Fe sheriff. Photos show Baldwin appearing really distraught and on the phone outside of the sheriff's office, where he voluntarily spoke to investigators. He has not been charged. Baldwin was filming a Western called Rust at a ranch outside of Santa Fe when the apparently accidental shooting happened. The film's DP, Helena Hutchins, died at the hospital. The film's director, Joel Swaza, is receiving emergency care at another hospital. His condition is unknown. Wow. I mean, this is a wild story. I mean, we basically rewrote the podcast because this broke overnight.
Yeah, I didn't see this until I woke up this morning. So Baldwin has not yet commented. Sources telling Deadline that he didn't know the type of ammunition that was in the gun. And this has happened before. It's not common, but it has happened. In 1984, an actor on the set of a TV show called Cover Up shot himself in the head with a gun that was loaded with blanks. And then there's, of course, the more famous one that you guys probably remember. Back in 1993, the actor Brandon Lee, the son of martial arts legend Bruce Lee, was killed by a prop gun that was fired by another actor on the set of the movie The Crow. So, it's too early to glean much from this, but it looks like this is going to be the fault of the movie's prop master. That's the person who's in charge with firearm safety on set.
Well, I mean, the question that first came to my mind, having zero background in this, is why there's any real ammunition in the gun.
Well, I think my understanding, and again, we don't know yet, my understanding is blanks can kill people. I think that it was a blank that killed Brandon Lee. And again, I'm not positive on this. So we don't know yet, but you're right. If it turns out that there were real bullets in this gun, that's a whole nother ball of wax, right?
Just quickly, a little bit about this woman who was killed, the director of photography, Helena Hutchins. She actually is from the Ukraine. She grew up on a Soviet military base within the Arctic Circle. This is according all to her website. She graduated from the American Film Institute Conservatory in 2015. She was considered one of the rising stars in this industry. And she, so just our worlds colliding in terms of news. She recently had posted on Facebook a photo that showed her and the cast of this movie, including Baldwin, and it said just about that strike that was potentially going to happen over the weekend. Our IATSE solidarity stand on Rust, just basically showing their support for all of those workers who are behind the scenes.
Yeah, and this guy, Joel Souza, the director, who, again, is in the hospital, he's been around. He's been around the block. I'm looking at his IMDb page now. He directed the movie called Crown Vic in 2019, a Christmas movie called Christmas Trade, Ghost Squad. So, nothing huge, but he's certainly, been in the industry. So prayers for him, his recovery, but just how incredibly sad, right?
Wow. All right, switching gears. Winter is coming. The government's annual winter outlook predicting a relatively mild and dry winter for most of the country, with the exception being the northern states between Washington and the Great Lakes. And that is because La Nina is back for a second year. The Pacific climate pattern typically pushes the jet stream up, making for warmer and drier conditions to the south. The presence of La Nina this winter, bad news though for the drought in the Southwest, but good news, I guess, for drought conditions in Northern California and the Pacific Northwest. And I guess the rest of us here in the Northeast, too. who
Right.
potentially will have a little bit less snow.
Hopefully. Yeah, the Pacific Northwest and California, it's good for it because they're already seeing some pretty epic storms that are going to put an end to this fire season. So that is good. But yes, it's good news for the rest of us, especially Jill, just because, as we've been talking about, heating bills this winter are going to be really expensive. One of the nice things about living in a pre-war New York City apartment is you don't have to pay for heat, right? It all comes out of the radiator, and the landlord's on the hook for it. But for the rest of you folks, just given the price of natural gas futures, we should hope for a mild winter. We could use it.
Yes. The Biden administration will need to decide whether to prosecute Steve Bannon after he was held in contempt of Congress for stonewalling the January 6th investigation. All House Democrats and 9 Republicans voted to hold Bannon, a close Trump ally, in contempt. It's not clear what happens now. The DOJ would have to pursue criminal charges against Bannon. The last time that happened over a contempt of Congress vote was back during Watergate.
There's a headache that I'm sure the Biden administration does not want to deal with at the moment. But just on this vote, just put another way, 202 House Republicans basically said that they were cool with whitewashing January 6th. They don't care. They don't just move on to the next one. The party has basically abdicated any responsibility for what happened on that day. Also, the Senate Republicans yesterday blocked or was it the day before or yesterday? I don't know. But either way, they blocked the voting rights bill. So it is, we've talked about this before, and it's just so depressing because I don't know how you look at the GOP in its current state as a party that stands for anything except like the subversion of democracy. It's so upsetting.
On the issue of Bannon, so he is basically claiming executive privilege, saying that, Trump, who was president at the time of January 6th, is saying that he is preventing Bannon from speaking. So that's kind of what he's trying to, that's the legality of what he's trying to do. Clearly, these Congress members aren't buying it. In other Trump news, shares of a company linked to former President Trump's new media venture skyrocketed more than 460% after Trump announced a plan to create a social app called Truth Social. That app is set to launch next year, part of Trump Media and Technology Group, which is attempting to go public via a SPAC merger with a shell company called Digital World Acquisition. The SPAC approach gives Trump funding for this new social media platform.
This is all very confusing. So it's not just you if you can't really keep track of this. But the money man here behind the SPAC merger is a guy named Patrick Orlando, who happens to run another shell company based in Wuhan, China. I don't know, not really sure what to make of that. But
feels like that has to be a coincidence.
I guess.
No?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying like he was like he like started COVID or anything. It's just this stuff is all just so weird, right? Everything is just so strange. But anyway, this Trump social platform, I take it with a grain of salt. I mean, the guy is famous for making some of these big announcements that don't really end up coming to fruition. And I think the problem with the business model is that, the pitch is kind of like there should be some sort of like conservative alternative to the big tech companies, to Twitter and Facebook. But conservatives already use those platforms, right? If you ever look at the most shared list of posts on Facebook on any given day, it's almost entirely like Fox News and some kind of like MAGA guys. So the people who they want to use this platform are already using Facebook. Put it another way, right?
Well, that's what struck me. It's like, what are you posting that they're taking? How crazy is it going to get? You know what I mean? Because there's right. Platforms out there, to your point, and the most shared are always kind of the right wing stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, staying on the SPAC beat, 2 years after its IPO imploded in one of the biggest flameouts in Wall Street history, WeWork is a public company at last. The office-sharing company went public through a SPAC merger with BowX Acquisition. WeWork has spent the pandemic slashing costs, cutting jobs, renegotiating leases, and closing locations to position itself for the post-COVID work landscape.
And unlike the last time they tried to do this, investors actually seem to like what they see this time. Shares of the new WeWork soaring 13% in their debut on the NYSE yesterday. I've said it before, COVID was the best thing to ever happen to the remnants of this company. You can easily see how a sort of leaner, meaner WeWork could be very well positioned for our hybrid work or our work from home era. The problem, though, is that most WeWork locations are in like the central business districts of cities, right? And I don't think people are necessarily going to want to work from there if they don't just have to go into their regular office. You know what I mean? Like, it seems like the smarter move would be to open kind of like some of these smaller co-working spaces in the suburbs. And Saks is actually doing that. Saks is taking a lot of its old department stores that were not in main cities and turning those into co-working spaces, which makes kind of makes sense.
I completely agree. Look, where WeWork stands to do well, I guess, is if you have perhaps a smaller business and that was renting expensive office space in Midtown Manhattan or somewhere else, and just said, you know what, we don't need workers in the office 5 days a week. Let's slash this cost. We don't need the overhead. And then they say, once a week, we want to get everyone together. We're going to meet at a WeWork, and it's going to be less expensive, but we can get office space. We could get together. We could meet in person. That I think is the real opportunity there. But look, I think also what went on with WeWork is a sign in some ways. We talk about just all of the failures of our financial system. What happened with WeWork back with their initial IPO was that, or their IPO attempt, was that the system did work. They went on this quote unquote roadshow, as it's called, opened up their books. Adam Neumann had to answer a ton of questions from investors. And they basically looked at the numbers and said, none of this makes sense. This is, what are you doing? This business is totally off the rails. And then, as we know, the rest is history. So I think it points to WeWork. One of my big takeaways from that story is, in some ways, that the system does actually work.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And they, now that they're a much smaller operation, I think people are more interested. Like, the core business idea is still attractive. Right.
There was that documentary about WeWork.
Oh, amazing!
That is great. We talked about it a while ago when it first came out. But one of their ventures that they were going to do was open up like We Live, which is a living space. It looked like my definition of hell. I mean, to share it's almost like a dorm, like a cooler dorm, I guess. No way. I mean, I barely wanted a roommate, let alone 15 roommates.
Totally.
So
and
I'm not surprised that it didn't work.
They had another brilliant idea. It was like a pre-K, some sort of like a nursery school. Yeah, but it was, it's the same thing with all of these companies. They get too big for their britches, right? It's like Uber saying like, oh, we're going to, make the car irrelevant. It's like, no, you're actually making traffic worse. But you do have a specific thing that works, which is basically acting as a cab, right?
No, you make a great point. I think that happens with a lot of, Scott Galloway famously said, like, you tell a young man he's Jesus Christ, he's going to believe you. And that's basically what happened to Adam Neumann in a lot of ways, where they thought they were going to just change the world. And I guess you do have ideas that do change the world, but it is also a business.
It's rare.
And what they forgot was that they did have to make some money here at a certain point.
Right.
Warner Media, meanwhile, has confirmed it's in talks with Sopranos creator David Chase on a new Sopranos-related prequel series for HBO Max. Warner saying it is thrilled with the results for The Many Saints of Newark. Even though that film was panned by audiences and bombed at the box office, the original Sopranos series, though, has been getting something of a second life on streaming, thanks to Gen Z viewers just discovering the show. So Sopranos was trending almost every day leading up to the Saints of Newark. It was trending on Twitter, and I was so confused. I'm like, why is the Sopranos trending? And I guess it was just because of these new viewers who were maybe catching up on it because the prequel was coming out.
I think COVID had a lot to do with it. People just kind of locked up looking for stuff to watch. I mean, the show is eminently watchable. It's the best show in history, in my opinion. I don't know. Did we ever discuss Many Saints of Newark? It was so bad. It's one of those movies that was so bad, I still get angry when I think about how bad it was, and that those are 2 hours that I'll never get back from my life. But I do find this fascinating, just how Sopranos is becoming this kind of new cult symbol among this younger generation who are, like we just said, discovering it on HBO Max. The Sopranos was always like a parable about an American empire kind of in terminal decline. The show is ahead of its time, and it's become really prescient when you rewatch it, as I did a few months ago. And I think that's what's driving this, because so many of the themes in that show are applicable even more so today. And this is not like an original thought. There was a great piece on this in the New York Times Magazine a couple weeks ago that I highly recommend. The title was, I think, just like, why are so many young people why is every young person in America watching The Sopranos? It's the title of that.
All right, time for more to know before you go. The FBI has confirmed that the human remains found this week in a Florida nature reserve are indeed those of Brian Laundrie. Authorities used dental records to ID the body, and this puts some measure of closure on this sad story about Gabby Petito's killing that riveted the country since she disappeared early last month.
If there's any good news to come from this, it's that they actually found, if you can believe this, over the course of this search, 5 bodies of missing people. Yeah, just around the country. Five missing people's bodies were found in as part of this manhunt, which, I don't know, just tells you about all the other, sad stories out there that we don't even really know about, right? But at least, hopefully, this does give a little bit of closure to that family.
Well, the question, there's also, for Gabby Petito's family, I'm sure this was very bad news because they probably wanted Brian Laundrie, I would assume, alive to be able to ask him what the heck happened. But look, a lot of real questions came during this time period, including, issues surrounding domestic violence and these toxic relationships. Is what you're putting out on social media accurate? A message for young people who are looking at Gabby Petito, this road trip, and thinking everything was great. Sometimes what happens behind the scenes does not match what you're watching in terms of social media. And also this real difference in the way the media and everyone treats missing people who are people of color, women of color. Do they get the same attention as missing white women? So hopefully we still talk about that stuff. Hopefully now that, Laundrie's body has been found, we don't forget those are real issues.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what sort of became so riveting about this case, all of those issues combined. Okay, meanwhile, across the pond, Buckingham Palace disclosing that Queen Elizabeth spent a night in the hospital this week after she had to cancel a trip to Northern Ireland on the advice of her doctors. The 95-year-old monarch back at her desk at Windsor Castle as of yesterday and said to be in good spirits, according to the palace. This woman is a worker. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's crazy. She celebrates 70 years on the throne next summer.
The CDC put its stamp of approval on booster shots for Moderna and J&J vaccine recipients, making tens of millions of Americans eligible for boosters as of today. So if you got Pfizer or Moderna, you can get a booster if you're over 65 or have a living or work condition that puts you at high risk, as long as your last dose was more than 6 months ago. For J&J, all adults are eligible. You don't have to get the booster as well. That was made by your initial shot, so you could mix and match.
Mix and match. I'm ready. Okay, I wanted to mention this. Snap, the parent company of Snapchat, reporting earnings yesterday that really sort of perked up my ears. The social media company warning that supply chain issues are starting to hit digital advertising, which I didn't really think about, but makes sense when you think about it, right? Like, why would you advertise for a product that you can't get into people's hands, you can't get into store shelves? Twitter, Facebook, and Google all taking a hit on that news. Again, the worst possible time for the advertising business to be in trouble, just coming right before the holidays. And it just shows you the supply chain issues are hitting everything now. It's not just, toilet paper and groceries. It's Snap. It's digital advertising.
Amherst College dropping legacy admissions, making it one of the first of the highly selective private colleges to abandon a policy that gives a leg up to family members of alumni. Amherst's Dean of Admissions saying that legacy applicants will now have to stand on their own 2 feet.
This is probably worth a longer discussion. Maybe we should do it next week. It's sort of a fascinating story. Amherst, by the way, costs like $85,000 a year in tuition. So it's like, I guess good for them for doing this, but it's not exactly like they're opening the floodgates for anybody who wants to go there. It's completely, what's happening in colleges right now is absolutely insane. Anyway,
there's also a big protest going on amongst students at Howard University, where they're basically saying this school has just received so much money in grants and endowments, and yet they're saying like the living conditions for students is basically deplorable, that there's mold everywhere. Kids are actually getting respiratory problems because they're living in these dorms that are covered in mold. So perhaps we do a bigger just overall state of college next week.
It's a good idea. Yeah, some of these schools where this happens, they have endowments that are literally the size of like the GDP of some countries. There's no excuse for that. In sports, the NBA season underway this week. Steph Curry is coming to play. The Warrior star dropped 45 against the Clippers last night, including 2 3-balls in the final minutes, coming after he scored a triple-double in the Warriors' opener against the Lakers. Curry's been in the league now for more than a decade, and he is somehow getting better, it seems. It's amazing.
Time for a little love-hate date. Okay, one thing that we love, the skip intro button when you're streaming. It's great for a show that you're rewatching or one with a long and boring title sequence. Or any that you've seen the intro more than once. Like, at that point, move on.
The caveat though, Succession. Succession has the greatest intro of any show ever. Even better than The Sopranos, I think. It's just like, that when those like piano chords hit, I love it. I'll never skip the intro on that one. And just on this topic of streaming, one thing that we hate, when the next episode immediately starts playing as soon as the previous episode's credits start rolling. Do you know what I'm talking about? The streamers all do this, but Netflix is by far the worst offender. It's like, can you give me a second to digest what I just watched? Like, maybe I want to watch the credits. Maybe I want to take a breath or go to the bathroom without having to like lunge for the remote. It's just, there's nothing that makes you feel like more of like a mindless zombie or like a hamster on a wheel than when they just immediately start playing this.
I love when they do this.
Really?
Yes, because I'm such a binge watcher. And I've actually, I recently binged You on Netflix.
Yeah.
And I've noticed just that they sped through the credits, and I was thrilled because I was like, Netflix is doing this right. Yes, I want my show. I don't need a break because I have the remote next to me. So if I need a break, I'll stop it.
Okay, fair point.
One thing that we ate, apple cider donuts. In terms of fall snacks, I think top 3, right?
Easily top 3. And the key with apple cider donuts is warm them up. Put them in like the oven for a few minutes. Yeah, with some coffee. Oh God, I'm gonna do that for breakfast today, I think.
All right, that is what you need to know for Friday, October 22nd.
All right, guys. See you guys on YouTube in a little bit. Have a great weekend.